Just an announcement. Today was supposed to be Ayurveda by Amrita, but she's not feeling well. So I'll be teaching the research methodologies today. Shubha, you started the recording?
Yeah, Ashwini.
Okay. All right. So let's start. I have shared the screen here. If you would like to take a look, that will be great, because even if not for the first part, the second part, definitely we want you looking at the screen. So first part will be about what is what are the different aspects of research, and what is it that we need to know in order to become evidence-based practice, which we are. We are not learning research methodologies as researchers, more as people who would like to go into searching for evidence, understanding what is evidence, and also using that. So understanding good research from so-so research. Okay, see all of this. So now coming to, somebody has their video on, and I think you can, yeah, somehow the screen keeps coming up and going away. In any case, keep it. Look at the screen though. Okay. I don't know why this keeps popping in and out. Okay. All right. So let us talk about research. What is research methodology here? When we look at the modern medicine or any field, psychology, most of the fields follow the empirical research based on certain experiments done by various researchers. And I think since industrial age, maybe 16th century onwards, research has been a very important aspect of science. And anything that we would like to say is based on the research done. And this has been biggest um, methodology based revolution that has happened in the modern world. Earlier times, especially the Eastern sciences, went more by the time tested methodologies and inner researchers, so to say, but not necessarily anything empirical. But this developed in Europe, and since then it has been quite standard in identifying anything that is as a subject to be taught and also to be followed when it comes to methodologies, processes, and also to continue to believe in certain things. So all of that is based on empirical data. So what is empirical data? What is research? What are the different types? That's what we are going to look at. There is this open.edu, open learning platform, and I'll be sending this link over to you. It's a very nice link here on research methodologies. We don't need to go anywhere. We don't need to look at any manual or anything. This is a perfect manual for the beginners. So if you can see on the left side, you will see it talks about the introduction, learning outcomes, objective and subjective research, and so forth. So I will kind of um, not cover all the other topics of especially the different research perspectives and whatnot. Go ahead and read that, okay? And I will straight go into objective and subjective research because that's of interest for us in this subject here, today's subject. So objective research and subjective research. Before we go there, basically research in social science, for especially what is social science, right? Research even on yoga and its efficacies, for the most part, I would like to put them in social science. I don't know where it comes under, although it may also be under health science. For the most part, there is a lot of aspects of yoga research that comes under social science as well. And if there is something called spiritual science, that too. So, however, let us look at what is subjective research and what is objective research, which is applicable everywhere. Meanwhile, in case of research, there are three aspects. One is explorative research, and then explanatory research, and there is a descriptive research. So what is exploratory research? Exploratory research is basically observation and any other methods that such as survey or interview or anything, where you're trying to gather initial uh, preliminary information to understand whether a particular subject can be even researched. That is exploratory research. And explanatory research is basically using a hypothesis. What is hypothesis? Let's say I come up with a sentence called yoga helps me improve my breathing or improve my certain aspect of my health. Then I have that hypothesis in mind. I know at least it may have happened to me, or maybe in my practice to a few people, it may have helped a few people in a certain way. That becomes my hypothesis. But is it true, or is it one-off case, or is it just an exception? Is it something that can be done in a way that everybody benefits? All of these are the questions that I have. And so that is my hypothesis, and I work on testing that. So that is the explanatory research. That is, I have a certain conclusion already in my mind, and I test it. So that's called deductive. There is something called inductive and deductive. Inductive is rather, I should say, inductive is the one that has a conclusion made, whereas deductive is the one like which has a certain, it's the one that establishes a conclusion. So exploratory is where I tend to have a conclusion and I just go and try and see that. Whereas in case of explanatory research, it says it is tends to be deductive, where I deduce from a certain, I come to a certain conclusion based on the subject and the hypothesis. So if you search for inductive, again, here, I'm not an expert here, but you can easily search and find out. So here it's when a conclusion is established, whereas deductive is deductive reasoning is the one that starts with a premise. So I have a premise, which is the hypothesis for me, and that is the one that I use to explain whether this is correct or not. Whereas descriptive research, it may just be that I want to explain something, I want to describe something. Usually they say descriptive research is not sufficient for an academic project, but that also can be done. So in case of what is subjective and what is objective, this is what we really are more interested in. So subjective research is when I would like to consider cultures, motivation, leadership, performance. They're all like human categorization of the world. They are not necessarily something that can be easily taken as an object to study. It can be very subjective in the sense that I look at people's experiences as part of my process of research. Whereas in case of objective research, it's more a fact that I'm trying to establish, or a fact that comes out of my research, such as any scientific research, say that has happened on certain character properties of a chemical, for example. There's nothing subjective in that. It's an objective research. So I have a question in my mind and I go after that question. And to me, in my objective research, I don't see anything right here, if you can see. I regard the world as objectively out there. It's out there. There is some process, there is some data out there, and that is the data I need to bring out. So the fact is yet to be discovered is what is the premise when it comes to objective study. Whereas when it comes to subjective study, I don't take that there is one kind of world out there, but for me, the world is that of, it's a world of meanings represented in signs, symbols, and it has multiple knowledges. There is nothing like one conclusion that I'm after. It can be based on the culture of the people, based on the timing, based on the society. So, based on all of these factors, today I'll arrive at certain conclusions. So that is kind of subjective research here. And so we also can call it qualitative versus quantitative here in some ways. When we say quantitative, we just are trying to form certain statistical analysis, like right here, if it says the perspective which privileges objectivity is called positivism. It's based on the data, positive or negative. Positivist researchers use qualitative methodologies, which are based on measurements and numbers. That's qualitative. Interpretivists. So now the data, when it comes to subjective research, also has a certain set of interpretations or certain ways to interpret data, because it's not exactly a simple conclusion that we arrive at, and it'll be more taking into account complex factors, viewpoints, experiences, various feelings. Then there are interpreters who arrive at certain conclusion. So interpretivists are more concerned with language and other forms of qualitative data, which are based on words and images. Having said that, researchers using objectivists and positivists assumptions sometimes use qualitative data, while interpretivists sometimes use quantitative data. Okay, so there is that aspect to research as well, whether it's a quantitative research or a qualitative research. And then there is also this subject of whether the researcher is an outsider or an insider. That means, let's say I could be, or I am one of the research participants, in the sense that, let's say I've tried it, I've been in a system and something has worked for me, and I'm trying to test that. That is kind of how you can see it here. The term insider can also include semi-insider. And that means I have been a part of that quote unquote research or the study. That is the difference there. And then let's move on quickly into deciding what to research. This doesn't concern us too much, because we're not researchers trying to look for a topic that we want to research, but at the same time, to some extent, you would want to know how to even look at research and to study any kind of effect. It doesn't have to be in a proper research manner. Even if you're doing any clinical documentation, whether you're doing any, your own arriving at a certain set of, say, parameters, you want to find out for yourself, how do I approach this particular subject? For example, you want to see whether left nostril breathing or right nostril breathing, does it do what they say, right? Ancient texts say certain things. The yoga text of Swara Yoga says certain things. Now, am I experimenting on myself to see whether if I do, say, left nostril breathing for 15 minutes of left nostril breathing every day for 15 days, am I going to feel any difference in my personality? Will I be a little more relaxed, a little more artistic? Am I evoking that kind of personality, as they say? And if I, on the other hand, do right nostril breathing for 15 days, 15 minutes every day, what am I going to feel? So all of these can be done on ourselves, at least, if not for the whole group. So if I need to come up with a question, how do I approach that subject? And what is the safest way to do that also matters a lot, because can I sit down, plug my left nostril and keep breathing with my right nostril? I heard from Prashanti, one lady did that. She just heard that right nostril breathing reduces weight, and so she just put her cotton, um, she plugged with some cotton in her left nostril, and she got into some dangerous side effects also through that. So that is not how we do. So we need to come up with a question and understand what are the past research, if there is any previous research done, and what has happened, what are the materials and methods, and what has gone in there, and what do I do from here. So all of that is involved here. So what to research becomes one of the subjects for especially researchers. It's a pretty frustrating subject because they many a time struggle with that question in the first place. Now, research ethics. This is a very big topic, and every research organization has what they call um, ethical research, ERB, Ethical Research Board. And of course, different countries call it by different names. But the point is, there has to be a board in every institution, which is headed by and comprised by a bunch of good, sound researchers. And in fact, they say your study makes or breaks depending on the ethical research board. So getting approval from ERB is the biggest challenge that anyone goes through when it comes to research. So why? Why is that the case? Earlier researchers, especially in 16th, 17th, 18th century, there have been a lot of research projects that involved torturing many of the animals, and humans included, prisoners, various groups of people, by luring them with money, whatever it could be, poor people signing up for some crazy drug research, or any kind of even psychology researches that were done on people were very uh, inhuman, so to say. So although yes, a lot of good data has come out of that, especially in one case they actually deprived the baby uh, rats or baby animals of motherly care, and they gave some electric or some other um mom. They call the mom that actually gave milk, but there was no, just the milk was delivered to the baby, but it was just a sort of a doll, or some, not even a doll, it was just some machine. So yes, the baby got milk, but the baby animal, but then I think it was monkey, I'm not sure. But then there was no motherly care, and it suffered a lot. So that felt, it was pretty you know, sad story, actually. Many uh, dangerous ways of research has been conducted in the past. And one of them was very bad research was when they they asked a bunch of questions to these people, some psychology related questions. And when they answered not psychology related question, it was just a regular quiz like thing. And there was a bunch of people who were taking the questions and exam, and there were a bunch of people who were watching the process of taking exams. And the bunch of people who were taking exams uh, supposedly were given an electric shock by the people who were watching. And whenever a wrong answer happens, they are supposed to shock them. And the successive wrong answers, they are supposed to increase the voltage of the shock, all the way up to the point where the shock voltage was supposed to be so high that the subjects were supposed to scream very badly. And then there were mentors who would stand and say, no, no, keep increasing, it's okay, let them scream, let them feel bad, keep increasing. And then they would continue to increase. And shockingly, they found out that up to 60 or 70% of the observers, in spite of the screaming patients or participants, they increased the voltage to the point where one could actually electrocute them. This was a research. And then later they found out that they were actually faking. There was no real shock. But then the effect of that, the psychological trauma that the observers felt at the after the research was terrible, because the guilt of you having shocked them to that level, or would have shocked them if there was a real voltage, was unbelievable, right? How could you have given a shock of some 300 volts or something horrible like that? So ethics are very important when it comes to research, because you're playing with lives of people or animals for that matter. So yet I'm sure there are still a lot of researches that involve animals. However, they try and do as much. I don't know how it is done, but I'm sure there is good amount of ethics followed nowadays compared to the earlier days, especially when it comes to human subjects. Okay, so this is one of the most important topics. Please read up on these things. I'm not claiming to be any research expert. I've just read them and I'm sharing that knowledge. So once again, I think we covered coming up with a research subject. What to research is one thing, and developing research questions is another thing. So you may want to read up on this, and although you may have come up with a research subject, developing the right research, and in our case, even searching the research, previous literature, that also involves coming up with the right research question, so that you know what to search. So we'll work on that. And I want you to read up on this, because if I continue, then we won't finish the real subject that we are trying to address today, and that is the MSRT study. And then comes the strategy to follow. What research strategy should I follow, and what are the case studies? What are the qualitative interviews? What are the tests that I have to observe, and what are my research questions? See, this is how the graph is. As you can see, research questions, qualitative interviews, then action research or action oriented research. Is it action oriented research? Then what are there any quantitative survey that I'm doing? And then what are the case studies? So that helps you come up with a strategy, and then you come up with a research design. And we'll go through all of these things in our MSRT study. What are the interviews, observations, diaries, conversations, reports, statistics, and surveys? What is a focus group that I'm planning to use, and why do I use a certain focus group, and so forth. So go through this. Then comes the research methodology. I would ask you to go through this also. What kind of methodology do you use? And there are lots of good activities that he has given here. And you may want to study this entire open, very easy, very simple thing to study. I'm not going to cover all the details here, but I'll straight go to MSRT study, and that will probably help you to go through this document here. And is this like a big part of the subject that we are learning, in the sense that is it part of the curriculum that we have to know every aspect of research methodology? Not really. It's not a subject like that. But then you definitely will appreciate learning that if you looked into this MSRT study that we have worked on. Okay, so I'm going straight into the subject of MSRT brainstorming that we have done. And I have worked closely with the researchers. Again, as I said, I'm not a researcher. I have not taken any huge research methodology subjects. So it doesn't need any of that. It just requires us to read some of these open learning documents, and that will help us understand. And also, the more literature you read on these researchers, the more you will start understanding what are the different standard tests out there, and what are the different ways to not only search for the research, but eventually even come up with a study design if you would like to. Okay, so here is one. What did we do? We came up with a question. The question was, what does MSRT do for, say, the person who has been suffering from a lot of stress, which is what we wanted to come up with as a research. Why did the research come? Is it is the, what they said, semi-inner study or outer study, right? The subject of whether I'm part of that research, sort of, in the sense that we have been practicing MSRT, we have been teaching MSRT, and we see that there is a lot of improvement in one's stress and their outlook when they practice MSRT. So we have seen this for ourselves as well as for our students and clients. So let us see what is the effect of that. And we wanted to do a study like that on, should we do, the question was, should we study on internet? That's one thing, that is online. Can we give this study online? That is one question. Should we do only in person? Can I do this? Can I study the effect of MSRT conducted only for 10 days? And is there going to be a difference? That is the third question. And what kind of group of people should we give MSRT to? Is it for youngsters? We have done some work on youngsters, and we find that MSRT is very useful for high school students, for college students. Should we work on that group, or should we have a very broad audience from age 20 to all the way up to 70? Is it possible to do a study like that on a very wide range of people? They say, again, when a study is done, there is another aspect of research methodologies where you are studying. Do you do unilateral group? That is, one group, are you studying like that, taking one group and studying the pre and post? Or are you going to take a control group and do a age matched control group study? That means to say, let's say I have I'm studying effect of MSRT on the age group of 20 to say 50. I'm just giving a random number there. From 20 to 50, if I'm doing a study on people with MSRT study on people, and there is a control group, am I distributing the age group in the same way as I have distributed the age group in MSRT for control group as well? So that means, let's say there are 10% of the students of the people in the age group 20 to 25, and say 30% of the people in the age group, say 25 to 55, and then another bunch of like that, right? There is a distribution. And am I following the same distribution pattern for the control group? So this is called age matched, right? So you're distributing equally to the other control group. So that's called control group study, right? And there is this blind versus non-blind studies. What is blind study? When say there are two groups, that is the control group and the study group, both of them are getting, say, a drug, and they don't know whether it's a drug that will help them or that drug that is simply just a placebo, which has no effect on them. They won't know that. They just have to swallow the pill. So that is blind, because they are blind to the study. Whereas in case of MSRT, can they be blind? Can we say, oh, you're not doing yoga? It's not possible for us to keep them in a blind study. So in yoga, there is no such thing as blind, but however, we give them certain yoga practice, and they practice that and they report. In some cases, probably it can be done with, let's say, if we were to do MSRT with Mahamrutyunjay mantra versus MSRT without Mahamrutyunjay mantra. We don't tell them what are the effects of Mahamrutyunjay mantra or anything like that. We just say, hey, you'll be practicing this. That can be done to some extent. But for the most part, we cannot be completely blind to, cannot do completely blind study here. So one of the questions we had was, should we do a study of MSRT with Mahamrutyunjay mantra and MSRT without Mahamrutyunjay mantra? That was also a question, by the way. So just to show you what were the different options we have used in this in this MSRT study, I'm just going to read out the options. The first one was immediate effect of MSRT technique on state, anxiety, and cognitive functions on individuals with stress. Now, look at this. Immediate effect, that is pre and post one MSRT session. Before MSRT, take the test, practice MSRT, and then take the test. So what are the tests to take? To measure the anxiety levels and to measure cognitive functions. What are the different cognitive functions? What are the anxiety tests that we want to give? Let's go down. Objective. See, there is study description, there is objective. That is, objective is to compare the immediate effect of mind sound resonance technique with supine rest on state, anxiety, and psychomotor performance. So this is supine rest is the other group. Control group will do supine rest, and the yoga group will do MSRT. And next, what is the hypothesis? That is, MSRT reduces and stress and improves cognitive functions, that is psychomotor functions. And how long does the whole of the study last? 1 week. Why 1 week? We thought of doing 4 to 6 consecutive days of 30 minutes of MSRT practice as a training session. Or rather, I would say we were planning to do it for 4 days. 2 days of training or 1 day of training session and about 4 days of practicing MSRT with pre and post. That is, take the average of 4 days just to cancel out any learning effects and various such things. And or maybe some days I'm better than the other days. So just to give that benefit of doubt, that maybe it was the first session, maybe they were still not ready for it, or maybe that day or their mood was bad, or whatever it could be. So to kind of like how in case of blood pressure, when the doctors want to establish that you have hypertension, they're supposed to take out the reading at least 3 times at the same time every day consecutively, right? That is the idea. Same thing here. We thought, okay, let's practice 4 to 6 times and take readings each time, pre and post, and then conclude whether it is helping or not. Then pre-training, 1 training session explaining the concept of MSRT with its Mahamrutyunjay mantra and meaning. And then the control group will do supine rest and then come down. So here, what are the measurements? This is very important. This list is what is very, very important for all of you, because you will have to take each of these in this particular. I'll share this MSRT brainstorming, and in that there is this sheet called options considered earlier. Please go through that, and all the list of the tests that we have considered are here. So one of them is perceived stress scale called PSS, and STI, that is stress inventory, state anxiety inventory. What are these tests? These are standardized tests that have, the tests themselves have been empirically studied. That is, they have studied, they have given these tests to thousands of people actually, and have seen that there is a pattern that emerges when the person is stressed versus when the person is relatively not stressed, and so forth. So the tests themselves are have gone through research. So it's a research proven test that the test itself is a marker of a certain aspect. So perceived stress scale, what is perceived stress scale? That is whether I am stressed or not does not depend on the external circumstances, as we already know this. And stress is a perceived feeling for the most part. Maybe I have half the stress of what an average single mom would have gone through in her life, but I may think that I'm very, very stressed out. This might be one single mom thinking like that. And so when we take a measure of that perceived stress, that will tell us what her psychological state is. And then maybe administer a MSRT session and see whether she continues to think the same way. This is the idea of perceived stress scale. So similarly, there is state anxiety inventory. We thought of using one or both. And then comes the digital letter substitution test. What is done here? A bunch of, I think it will be like a grid of a bunch of words, and they have to identify a certain pattern and things like that. So it just requires cognitive ability to be able to do that. And this is a great cognitive test. And any other questionnaire for religious or spiritual effects of Mahamrityunjay mantra, like fear of death and disease related scale. Here, there may not be standardized tests. There are some standardized tests, but not necessarily everything. So we thought we'll also come up with a bunch of research questions for them. So it's allowed. The research allows us to come up with our own bunch of questions and still, arrive at answers based on our questions and say, hey, so many people answered yes to this question. And at the end of 10 days, they answered in some other way, whatever that could be. So that was the other one. And then we have some additional measurements that we have listed here called resilience scale, positive and negative affect scale. This is a very nice questionnaire. Read that. Mindfulness, the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire, empowerment questionnaire. That is the psychological empowerment scale. How do I feel? Do I feel empowered? Is the question that usually people have. And this is a good scale. Standardized test. These are all American Psychological Association, APA, has come up with a bunch of questions, and very nice questions. So these are all scales. Then psychological empowerment scale, self-compassion scale. That's another very good questionnaire which tells us how spiritually or compassionate a certain person is. That also marks their inclinations and their lineages. They're lenient, where are they in terms of their personality, and that helps us decide whether a certain test, especially in our case yoga, helps them. To what extent does it help? If a person is self-compassionate, does it, if he or she is leaning towards a certain behavior or certain already pre-existing personality, then how does further spiritual practice given to them help, was our question actually. So things like that. Read up on all these questions, please. This is very important. And then now the question is, why did you come up with this list? How did you arrive at this whole bunch of list? How did I arrive at it? I'm not even a researcher. What did I do? I went through this. It's not a rocket science. You just go through and search for questions. And one of the questions I looked for is, what are the different psychological, tests done out there? So improvement in psychological and occupational well-being, followed by a brief yoga-based program for education professionals, was one of the research I came across, because the point was I was searching for brief yoga-based program. We were going to give a very small 3-day or 4-day sessions here and studying on the immediate effect of MSRT. So this research question I was asking, PubMed is one of the, you search for what's called PubMed. Okay, why is the word PubMed? I don't know. PubMed. In that, you will come up with, this is like an indexed journal, index basically. It's an index where you just start searching for example, yoga immediate effect or brief effect, brief yoga session, whatever name you want to come up with. And then you will come up with all these questions, and you keep going through one after the other. So cognitive rehabilitation for attention deficit following a stroke. Okay, go through and see if that helps. And then there is Corsi block tapping task. So then you have to go and read what is Corsi block tapping task and so forth, right? So this is how you search and then keep studying the literature. It's quite an exhaustive task. I had to go through this before we arrived at what we have as the final, almost final MSRT study that we are trying to get the permission from ERB and stuff. So this is the previous literature that I looked up, and there it says immediate effect of mind sound. From that, I think that's the effect which I have used here. There is here. This is the other one that I have used. Immediate effect of mind sound resonance technique on state anxiety and cognitive functions in patients suffering from generalized anxiety disorder. So you can see that there is a previous literature, and that's what we used to come up with our research question. Whereas the difference is, if there's no difference, what are you trying to do? Why are you studying the same question again? Will be the subject, right? It's not that you should not do a study when there is a previous study already done. You can still do a study if you see that the previous study was done on very small duration for a very small set of subjects in a different context, in a different country. You can always do cross-cultural study. And if it is done in a very, if there are certain things that are not done previously, you can still repeat the study with a new set of variables or parameters to test. You can do many such, you can take previous, or you should take previous research into consideration when you are studying any question. So we looked at a study like this, and we came up with this similar question, except not for patients suffering from anxiety disorder. That was our difference here. And we were trying to see if we can use the same set of same set of parameters to study state anxiety is being studied here, STAI, and see if there is any other test that we want to add. This was our option number one. So this was the question and option number one that we looked at, okay, with the previous literature. And difference between the previous study and the new study is what we were trying to lay out. Okay, so now this was the comment put by the researcher in SVASA. He has put the comments on each of the options that we suggested, and I would let you read out all these things. So I would, this is Dr. Guru. Okay. Now let's go back into option 2. Now I'll be a little faster in covering the rest of the options and let you read the research, and we'll further discuss all of these in a very interactive way in our next session. So option 2, if you see this, effect of 10 days of online mind sound resonance technique on state anxiety and cognitive function. So we said, okay, immediate effect, we don't know how will there be an immediate effect? Does it make sense for us to study an immediate effect, that is pre and post every day? We said maybe not. Maybe in one day, what kind of perceived anxiety difference there will be, PSS scale? Maybe not much. So let us see if we can study for 10 days. And should we just study on individuals with stress? That is very high, very broad. Let's see if we can do this on working professionals instead. And that was the second option. So you can read the rest of it. You will see that pretty much it's the same kind of study here, except we are not going to do psychomotor functions. That is, we said, okay, digit letter cancellation study doesn't make sense when you don't do it immediately. That is, as soon as you finish the study. These are called short-term memory or short-term cognitive functions tests, because if you want to see whether I am present at this moment, it's good to do that immediately after yoga. 10 days later, if you want to test them, just before the test, I may have gone through some major episode with my boss or something, and I may not be present. So the effect cannot be really, immediate effect of yoga cannot be studied effectively with that kind of cognitive psychomotor functions. Okay, something like, what kind of test will it be? Let's say they come up with a certain pattern, like 1 2 3 1 2 3, or 3 4 3 6 9, some, cancel out certain digits that don't apply, or some such thing. These are all cognitive tests. Or maybe looking at the screen and there will be something that is odd, and you go click on that odd thing, whatever you see. So you should be present. And that cognitive function, those cognitive functions can only be tested when you have just now cleared the mind, right? Otherwise, you don't know. 10 days after you have cleared the mind, you don't know what will be your cognitive state on a given day, because whatever could have happened just before would confound the effect of MSRT. So there is a word called confound. That means there are so many confounding factors. Even research on yoga or any such, subjective tests are done, because you don't know whether it was yoga that affected or it was some other factors that affected, in both positive way and negative way. So that's why you have to be very careful in selecting what kind of tests are administered and when they are administered. Immediately after the practice of yoga, or a day after you practice yoga. It all depends on whether you're looking for a long-term effect of yoga or a very short-term cognitive function related effect of yoga. So all of that is very, very important, and ethics review board reviews all of these, and they tell us whether we are making any sense, or we are simply cheating ourselves or the world of certain results. Just to tell you how this is done, for example, the second option will tell you, we said we'll do 12 days of research, 10 consecutive days of 30 minutes MSRT, and 1 day pre and 1 day post. The first day will be training session, and then pre-tests. And then the second day, the last day, that is not the 10th day. We had initially come up with the idea of doing it on the 10th day, and they said, no, you cannot, because you have done the test on the 10th day. Immediately after the practice, if you do, then their perceived stress would be, they would be feeling very nice, and they will give a different answer. Whereas the test will be with whatever they have in mind. So you cannot do that unless you're doing an immediate effect, which is I give the test, and then I practice MSRT, and I then give the test. That's a different story. But if you have done for 10 days and you want to study the effect of that, it has to be a day after. So that would be the idea here. And one of the tests that I came up with wrongly was the working memory. That is digit span forward. Read on this. And they said, well, it may not be very effective to do that and all that stuff. A lot of discussions have happened, but do go through these tests. And so one of the tests that we wanted to come up with is a burnout rate, right? The feeling of burnout, the burnout questionnaire. For working professionals, they always feel burnt out, right? So there is this burnout scale that we wanted to give. So this is the option number 2, and also the job satisfaction related questionnaire. So this was the second option. Then the third option, effect of 10 days of MSRT on stress, quality of sleep for individuals who get less than 8 hours of sleep, was the third question. This was more of a insomnia based, for people who have insomnia or who are not sleeping less owing to busy lifestyle. That was similar, except the age, the focus group was different. Then option 4, effect of 10 days of online mind sound resonance technique on state anxiety, stress, and cognitive functions. So this was the next one, and this started gaining popularity. So we are now leaning to, we pretty much have decided to do online study. And so in MSRT consistently practiced for 10 days improves state anxiety, level of stress, cognitive, we are not sure, mindfulness for sure, and can induce a positive change in individuals' life view. we expect varying magnitude of changes in this course cross-culturally. So we are doing study both in India and here. Okay, and it's 12-day study. The first and the last day, they get pre and post measures on, again, cognitive, we are not sure, mostly the stress scales. Then 10-day, this is also a 10-day consecutive practice and one training session and the supine rest. Initially, the thought was, should we have just supine rest, or should we, I think that also changed. And they said no point in giving supine rest, because first of all, we don't even know if they'll be supine resting, and it's online session. And the other reason we removed supine rest and we now put simply take pre and post, and 10 days you just do whatever you want to do. So it's just a control group without any particular practice. That is because what was said by the researchers in SVASA is even 10 days of supine rest like can induce some change in them. And we are doing a pilot here, and we are not yet sure how to cancel out, unless it's like a 6-week study or something. Supine rest will make the same difference as the MSRT. If you just make them lie down and do nothing, and there is a instructor there, which in online study, everything, all parameters, all of the research questions and the methodology changes quite a bit. But in case you want to do a study of a yoga group and a supine rest group for 10 days, if you make them just be in supine position, and if there is an instructor in the class just making sure they are just resting, that will still make a difference, pretty big. And so unless you are planning to have a long-term study for 4 to 6 weeks, Dr. Judu said, don't take supine rest as the control group, but instead just control group. That's it. They do whatever they are doing. They just give a pre and post. So that is the, because it's a 10-day study, because it's a pilot, we said, okay, let's not take supine rest as the test. So I think perceived stress scale and some stress anxiety is being used. And I don't think we are using letter cancellation tests, and some sleep questionnaire we may be using. And these are some other questions like that we had put, the resilience scale and the spiritual scale and so forth. So we are still deciding on that. But the overall option 4 is something that has been taken up now as a final candidate. And then the next one is option 5, I think put by Dr. Judu here, cross-cultural KAP. I don't know what is KAP though. Survey to understand determinants of mantra sound-based intervention across different study groups. His thing was that we just do a survey questionnaire. I think this is, when you want to take up survey questionnaire, they have to be the survey question subjects, the number of what they call baseline. Baseline is the number of people that participate in a study. The word is also N. N equals, what is the number N? What is the baseline? What is the subject pool of participants who are taking this research? That's a very important number in telling whether your research is a sound research or not. So in case of objective study, for example, there is a machine that is going to measure pre and post. Then even a research on 1 or 2 or 5 participants is a pretty good, strong research, depending on the precision of that machine or the device. So that is called the objective study, and the number of subjects being lesser is not a huge challenge, because what is assumed here is that the machine itself is pretty good, very predictable, and the human brain, let's say, if you are looking at the brain study, is also predictable. These are some of the premises, and so smaller number is okay. But if you are doing a study on certain psychological parameters or standardized tests, then at least, say in our case, I'm strictly restricting my arguments to this study here, and yoga studies especially, because again, if you go out there, there are a lot of parameters and the numbers change drastically. So in our studies of yoga, say 200 participants, 100 participants, 50 participants in various different situations can be seen as a good number. And that analysis also has to be done by the researchers. And in our case, we came up with a number of 176. There is a whole, they look at the previous studies, the subjects that have been used, how many subjects were used, and what was the study, and which journal has published it. Again, what is more important is which journal accepts our paper is a big question. And so based on that, um, based on the previous literature, we came up with 165 or 175 as the total research pool and for online studies, and based on the attrition ratio also, people can drop out, they may not complete the research. So based on all these parameters, we came up with 165 here. But then option 5 is a research, it's a survey, it's not a research of any kind. So it's more asking questions. What kind of mantra would you like? What does it, how does it feel? Do you chant a mantra? And do you feel anything? These kind of general questions. You're not really studying anything. You're not giving them any practice, and you're not studying the effects of a practice. If you're just surveying people, then the number of subjects have to range in thousands. Otherwise, it makes no sense. That kind of research otherwise has no meaning. So we said this is not the kind of study we want to do, although Dr. Judu was saying, okay, that can be one of the good subjects. So if you can see, I have commented on some of these suggestions. This was Dr. Judu's suggestion, and I commented on that. And it'll be good to look at this options considered earlier, and also coming to the pilot study MSRT intervention. Where is that? Yeah, so here, this is the finalized studies in the first page, and then some of the survey questions, Chinmay has put that here, and then options considered. So this work has been going on for at least a month or two now, and who all are involved, I have put together the initial framework here with different options, and then UCSB's Elliot, who is a PhD student, has been involved from UCSB side, along with his mentor, Dr. Schooler, who is a big name in research in UCSB's cognitive labs. And then Dr. Nagaratna is involved, and Dr. Judu and Dr. Manjuna, all of them from SVASA. So it's a pretty nice paper here. I mean, sorry, the subject matter here with all these considerations. And the talk that I gave today was not a particular lecture. I just want to clarify it. It's more trigger for you to kind of think in that direction and start doing your brainstorming in various ways whenever you want to, say, give a certain practice to a certain group of people with certain ailments or whatever it could be, that focus group could be. It'll be good to study the effect of any practice. What is evidence out there? It's a good question to have. It's a good way to go and do study on that. And also every month, Yoga Sudha, you can subscribe to them. Every month it publishes, Yoga Sudha is published, and also iJoy is another place, International Journal of Yoga. This is pretty much Vyasa's group is involved in that, International Journal of Yoga, and they come up with they publish a lot of research papers on yoga. Primarily, all of the Vyasa papers come out from here, and it's, I think, primarily funded by SVyasa, if I'm right. So read those and understand the landscape of research. So this is all I'm here to explain and talk. And as I said, I'm not a researcher. So if you have deep questions, I don't know how to answer them. and we can have Sriramji to come and talk about research methodologies. I'll talk to him and see if he's willing to give a few lectures because he's a PhD. Any questions? Any comments? Silence? Please unmute, and comment is fine. If not, questions.
Thank you, Ashwini. It's nice to know what is going on, very technical for us, but good that research is going, and it helps to give some evidence that it is helping. So
yeah,
it's good to know what is going on. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason we have taken up all this is because for the most part, yoga is not does not have the respect that the other modes of healing have because of this lack of empirical data. Yes, it is there, but it's not, everything is still at its infancy. And so yeah, this is scientifically, if we start working on these areas properly, then hopefully someday insurance will cover our healing. Someday the medical system will start taking yoga seriously as the healing therapy. This is all what we want happening. Any other comments, please? Okay, all right then. Thank you.
Thank you.